Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's Alive Learning Forum session. My name is Rasha Fadlallah, and I am the Senior Scientific Officer at the Knowledge to Policy Center at the American University of Beirut, and I also serve as co-chair of the Alive Learning Forum. I am delighted to be moderating today's conversation. Of course, we like to start by getting to know you, our audience. So perhaps maybe you can take a minute to tell us a bit about yourself, maybe type in the chat box where you are joining us from, what's your position, do you work around Living Evidence Repository? This will give us a sense of who's with us in the room, while maybe we wait a minute for others to join. So just use the chat box for those joining and just let us know a bit about yourself. Okay, we'll get back to the chat. I'll give time for people to fill it. So for today, we will be exploring living evidence repositories. So where are we when it comes to living evidence repositories? And are they facilitating access and reducing evidence production cost? So living evidence repositories are known as structured, continuously maintained collections of studies, data, and synthesis that are designed to make evidence easier to find, reuse, and update. They are built on two promises. First, that they improve access to the evidence, and second, that they reduce duplication and support more efficient evidence production. But an important question remains is to what extent are living evidence repositories delivering on that promise? And this is exactly what we will be focusing on today. We will explore where we have made progress, what challenges remain, and what role can AI play. We will also bring two perspectives. So a practical experience when it comes to actually developing and maintaining living evidence repositories, and the broader perspective on the current landscape when it comes to living evidence and their digital interfaces. And if we can go to the agenda. So, okay, great. So I will walk you briefly through today's agenda. So as I said, we will begin with two short presentations, each 10 minutes. First, Fumane Lequela will showcase the HPV vaccine delivery repository. It's a living evidence repository, providing the practical example of how a living evidence repository is developed and maintained. We will then hear from Dr. Fiona Campbell, who will present her findings from a scoping review that has examined the landscape of living evidence and gap maps, including their digital interfaces. And I think that scoping review covered over 44 living interfaces, providing very rich full insights. And after these presentations, we will bring together our speakers for a structured panel deep dive, if I may call it. And we are organizing it around three main themes. So this is where we are putting the living evidence repository to test. So access, efficiency, and AI and sustainability. We will then open the discussion to questions from you, the audience, before we conclude today's session. And for those of us who are joining us for the first time, so the Alive Learning Forum is a global exchange for advancing living evidence through collective learning. We serve as an open access network where we bring together evidence producers, users, and intermediaries to share insights, knowledge, and experiences around living evidence partnership. And when we talk about living evidence, I just want to clarify that we mean evidence that is continuously identified, synthesized, and updated to keep pace with rapidly evolving knowledge and decision. And just few housekeeping rules before we start with our session. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, so the session is being recorded and it will be shared online. Please do submit your questions and answers through the Q&A channel. You have been added to our mailing list for future events. And of course, there is a translation option that is available through Wordly. So you should find the link at the top right corner. You can simply click on it and select the language that you want. So without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to welcome our speakers for today. So we have Dr. Fiona Campbell and Fumaine Lequela. So Fiona is the Associate Professor of Evidence Synthesis at the University of Birmingham. She has more than 25 years of experience in evidence synthesis to support decision-making with particular expertise in scoping review, mapping review, evidence and gap map, and qualitative and mixed method synthesis. She holds a PhD in evidence synthesis method, and she also founded the Children and Young People's Wellbeing Methods Group within the Campbell collaboration. We also have Fumena Lequela, who is the head of the HPV Vaccine Delivery Evidence Partnership at Alive. This is a collaboration that builds and maintains living evidence to support HPV vaccine delivery and cervical cancer prevention, and it also onboards country partners across Africa and beyond. Her work spans global health security, health system strengthening, and vaccine equity, and she has built strategic partnership with major global health actors to accelerate implementation and evidence-informed decision-making. I would like to thank both of you for joining us today. And without further ado, Fumene, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Rasha. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, from wherever you're joining us from. I'm joining you from beautiful Harare. I'm attending the EPA managers meeting. It's a pleasure, and thank you all for the opportunity to share this work with you. Today, I will take you through the HPV vaccine delivery repository, as Rasha has mentioned, not only as a digital platform, but as one of the part of the wider living evidence system that we're building at Alive at Future Evidence Foundation. So I will briefly explain why we build it, where it sits within the HPV Evidence Partnership and how it works, what makes it living, and what we are learning as the repository evolves. I'm pleased to mention that we are now on version 3, which was released in June 2026, just last month. Next slide, please. The starting point was a familiar problem. I think we are all familiar with the fact that evidence on HPV vaccine, we may not all be familiar, excuse me. Evidence on HPV vaccine delivery is growing, but it is dispersed across journal articles. It's in program reports, it's in donor investments, implementation partners, and different institutional partners, platforms. So this creates 3 practical difficulties. The first one is that the evidence is fragmented across sources. And the second one is it is difficult for users to find and to interpret and apply it. This becomes particularly important when they are working against program and policy timelines. And the third one is that static products quickly become outdated, and as new evidence and program experience continue to emerge. So at the core of this, the challenge is not simply that evidence is unavailable. It is that evidence must be brought together, it must be organized and kept current, and also connected to the decisions people are trying to make. So the repository was therefore designed as a part of a broader living evidence system and not as a static library. Next, please. The HPV Evidence Partnership was established to try and help close the gap between the evidence being produced on HPV vaccine delivery and the decisions that countries and global partners need to make. The partnership brings together, as Sasha has already mentioned, 3 connected areas of work. And the first one is the living evidence system. And within the system, we have the repository, which is the focus of today's discussion. We have the evidence maps, the living systematic reviews, and evidence summaries. And the second pillar is the living evidence community. And this is very important because without the community, we wouldn't have the system at all. So the community, Sasha has already mentioned this, it brings together national decision makers, it brings together global partners, researchers, and synthesis teams who work together to make this living evidence system work. And lastly, is the partner support. We are hoping that what we are learning from the HPV evidence partnership and the building the living evidence system can also help us help institutions to explore how their own evidence products and processes might be able to move from static to living approaches. As I mentioned already today, we are focusing on the repository, and it's important to note that the repository is not the partnership itself, but we consider the repository as a shared evidence infrastructure. And this infrastructure supports the wider community, the synthesis that emerge from the evidence that's in the repository and the decision support work. Next, please. Next slide. Thank you. No, the previous one. Okay. The HPV, am I missing something? Sorry, can we go back to the last one? Previous one? Yes.
This one?
Let's
The
stop
partnership?
there.
Yeah. This one? Or next one?
Yes. This one. Let's stop there. Yes, thank you. Yes. So as I've already mentioned, the wider system is built around a simple principle, the decision makers, which should be served by evidence that is drawn from living banks of data and analysis. And this requires two connected elements. And the first one is the collaborative partnerships. So on one side, we have this collaborative partnerships of decision makers, evidence producers, and their intermediaries. And these relationships help us to clarify what decisions matter, what evidence is needed, and where perspectives may differ. And then on the evidence bank side, on the other side, there are evidence banks that are living, open, and assured. They assure a structure that can be reused. So I think the value that comes from connecting the two, which are the collaborative partnerships and the evidence banks, is that a repository can be technically strong and still remain underused if it is disconnected from institutional, priorities and workflows. And similarly, a strong evidence community cannot work effectively if it has to rebuild the evidence base each time a new question arises. So the repository sits within the evidence bank, and its role is to organize and maintain the evidence in a way that we think and hope that it supports both current use and future synthesis. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So currently the repository sits at 1,961 records, and all these records are on HPV vaccine delivery in low and middle income countries. And as it is currently, it includes evidence published in both English and French, and we can do dedicated French language searches, and this were introduced in the current version. Something to celebrate, really. And this is to improve the visibility of evidence from Francophone settings. So as it is now, users can search titles and abstracts. They can refine results through the taxonomy. Users can explore the evidence through an interactive map, and they can also filter by things such as delivery design, demand, equity, and governance. And I'm going to do a little showcase to just walk you through what you see when you get into the repository. If you could stop sharing, and then I'll share my screen. Thank you so much. Christian, if you could drop the request. Seems like I cannot share my screen.
There you go.
Okay. There we go. Is it this one? Let me see. Okay, here we are. So this is what you see when you you follow the link that we'll share. The thing that is still a bit annoying with the repository is that you still have to sign in with your name. It's not, you don't have to pay anything, but you just need to sign in and create an account, which can be annoying. And we're hoping that with upcoming versions of the repository, that feature will be eliminated. I'm just going to turn off my video so that I can save bandwidth while we are at this. So as you can see, currently, the repository sits at 1,961 references across HPV vaccine delivery, as we have mentioned. Something is... My apologies.
We can see your screen.
You can see my screen. Yeah, the Zoom the Zoom tab was doing that. So you can search the evidence from this search tab, or you can choose to visualize the evidence using, you can use it, see it as a bubble, either as a bubble or as a table. And you can also search within the African region as it may, or whatever region that you are interested in. And on the right side, you also have the taxonomy. This is the taxonomy that the community that I've mentioned came up with together. We're still refining it. The beauty of living is that we have this feedback function that you can use if you cannot find what you're looking for, or if something is distracting you or making it difficult for you to find whatever information you're looking for, you can use the feedback function and let us know. And we keep refining and making the repository better. So on this side, we have different taxonomy terms that are related to the HPV vaccine delivery. You can choose, you can choose by a thematic focus, publication year, by behavioral and social drivers, and so on and so forth. So we try to make it as comprehensive as possible, and we're still receiving feedback, and we're hoping that the next version will be and look even better than this. And then we also have the resources tab that shows you that we document everything that we do. So we have a report that shows what's in this version 3 of the repository. The protocol is in there, and the taxonomy terms are also in there if you are interested in looking at them. We also have the changelog from the first version, and there's a tutorial on how to use this. I'll stop sharing and we can go back to the presentation. Thank you so much. Next slide, please. I think we were past the user journey through the evidence. Yes, next slide, please. I think we're done with that. Yeah, so what makes the repository living? the living element is not simply that more records are added from time to time. So the repository is created through a connected system of processes. First of all, we need ongoing surveillance, evidence surveillance. We have teams that are working on a monthly basis currently, scoring through the evidence that's available and updating the system. We have human reviewers. The second one is that AI supports title and abstract screening and structured extraction. We also have human reviewers who remain responsible for full text screening and to resolve inclusion decisions. The taxonomy provides a consistent structure for classifying the evidence, as you have seen. And then we have a user and partner feedback informing how the taxonomy and interface evolves. That feedback is also a very important aspect of the living system, because it helps us to keep the system current. And the repository also connects to living systematic reviews. We are currently working on delivering on 8 systematic reviews that were collaboratively and in a joint effort agreed upon by the countries and the global actors that we work with in the partnership. So other synthesis products can also be developed from the same evidence base. So we believe that being on version 3 matters because each version has expanded the evidence base. We have refined the methods and we have improved how the evidence can be interrogated. So the current planned update cadence is approximately monthly, and updates are anticipated in early 2027 under the present funding arrangement. Next slide, please. So we know and understand that AI is currently a big thing. So I wanted to say a little bit about how AI has been used in this work. So it's been most useful for high volume, repetitive, and structured tasks. I think we have lost the presentation, Christian. Thank you. Yes, it's back. So AI has helped us process large search results, classify records against the taxonomy, and extract defined study characteristics. As you just seen in version 3, AI assisted the title and abstract screening of a large search field, and full text were still screened by humans with decisions checked by a second reviewer. AI is also being tested for generating summaries from selected evidence sets. But we know that the trust that does not come from the AI itself, it comes from how the system is designed. And that means that we continually keep defining the scope carefully, constraining AI to the structured taxonomy that you saw, so that we are grounding the claims in source evidence and testing performance and documenting methods as we go along. So we'll keep retaining the human oversight. And we understand that AI cannot determine which question matters most to a country. So whether evidence is transferable across settings, or how evidence should be weighed against financing, workforce, and political constraints that we know we are now being forced to work within. But AI can enable scale and speed, methodological judgment. We live that, and that will always remain human responsibilities. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have 4 lessons that we think are emerging from the work that we're doing. The first one is that a repository may be open and searchable, but users still need intuitive navigation. we need relevant filters and outputs that match the real decisions that our intermediaries and maybe EPA managers, decision makers on the ground are faced with. Number two is that the taxonomy is foundational to the repository, and it does more than organize the records. It shapes what users can find, how the evidence is grouped, and the boundaries within which AI operates. And thirdly, someone must be responsible for the evidence surveillance, validation, taxonomy changes, and the update cycles. And stewards have the responsibility for what a user finds in the repository. And lastly, I think the repository's value increases when it is connected to synthesis systems. As you saw in previous slides, the evidence communities, the country priorities, and institutional decision processes. I do not think that any one of those pillars is interchangeable or can be replaced at this point.
I want to thank you, Fomani, for your excellent illustration and for walking us through the HPV living repository. So while we wait for the second speaker to prepare the slide, I would like just I have maybe a question. So you've showed the process, what it includes, what are the different modalities, the user. Can you share maybe one concrete example of where the HPV living evidence repository actually influenced a policy, a program, a guideline, etc.? So are you seeing signs of early impact?
So I think the strongest example so far is we just came back in the past month from the Gates Foundation HPV Vaccine Delivery Learning Convening in June 2026. So it's not a direct policy change, but I think the influence was on an evidence product and a learning prioritization process. So we're able to use the repository to provide shared evidence infrastructure across 6 thematic areas, which were demand, sustained, and optimized delivery, equity, financing, and measurement. So we drew evidence synthesis from the repository, and participants were able to receive access to the evidence that was organized around the convening themes. It's early days, but I think this gave us some confidence that we'll be able to use it more concretely going forward.
No, this is excellent, Fumani, and I think and it's a tremendous effort, and you should really be proud of what you're doing. And we will hopefully have more time to talk more and delve into those during the panel and Q&A. I will now switch to the second speaker, and unfortunately, I have been told that Fiona Campbell is facing some issues with connectivity, so her student will be presenting on her behalf. So please, Thomas, can you go ahead and take the lead on that presentation? Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. I'll then try sharing my screen, although I'm not sure how, I don't see functionality to do that, to be frank.
Thomas, we can, Christian, can you share that from our end? I think we have Fiona's presentation.
With you. I just share with you, Thomas, but I can share it if you want.
Yeah, and Thomas, if we can
do... So I have the presentation, I just don't seem to have the option to present it in the interface.
Can you try to share and then request it? Because I think that's the easiest.
Okay. Because to be frank, I don't seem to see the option here.
You don't see the option there.
Christian, I think we need to switch him to a panelist.
I see.
Before he can share. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I allow him to. No, I can. I don't know. Okay, I can. Let me see if I can do it from here. If not, I'll share my screen. Okay. promote balance. Okay. Here you
Oh, I
are.
can see.
Now we
I
should
can.
be able. Yeah. I think he's rejoined, but I switched him now to a panelist. So now he should be able to share.
Apologies for the inconvenience, and please do start posting your questions and answer in the text box so that we can start answering as much as we can. And Thomas, just for the sake of time, it would be
Yes.
great if you can present in 7 minutes so that we
Right.
have time for the panel discussion and the Q&A from our audience. I just want to acknowledge the diversity of the audience, and
Of course.
and many of them come from, they have good background when it comes to the living evidence. So we're interested to hear from them as well. So thank you for that.
Of course. I'll try to be frank, but please be understanding. I have not been preparing for this presentation. So the idea for our research came from my supervisor, Dr. Fiona Campbell's research and her colleagues, which they already started a few years ago. And they found that evidence and gap maps are, although they started maybe not in health, but in other sectors, but they are being increasingly adopted in across sectors, but also there being there's very little research on how they can be used, and also since then there has been a lot of development in the area, some recommendations that to reduce duplicate effort we should be investing in infrastructure prioritization. So they're part of this infrastructure movement. And just for anybody who is still not sure what those are, we're talking about these evidence maps, such as the ones that Fumane showed. So this is exactly the same type of product. So I don't think I'm going to spend much time on this. And the rationale for this is that, well, for living maps, is that they are less kind of dense in terms of data extraction as compared to living reviews. They lend themselves better to automation, and they're becoming increasingly digital. So there's a lot of scope to learn how to design the best interface possible. So that's why we came up with this idea of kind of examining what digital interfaces are out there in the literature. We found 44 of them, and we looked at them systematically. Using a scoping review, we found that a lot of them, they started somehow in, after the onset of COVID. It was, I think, a big driver, as you can see on this screen. And then health sector is becoming now the more dominant as compared to the past, where it was not the case. The geographical restriction in most cases is not there. Interestingly, in terms of methodological guidance, a lot of different guidelines are being cited, and in most cases, nothing is actually being cited. So it's really a kind of a new terrain for a lot of researchers. They don't really know how to report this. With regards to the use of automation, we found surprisingly that actually quite a lot of them use automation in more than one stage often. You can see here the most common: searching, screening, coding. I think 3 maps have actually 4 stages. That includes risk of bias as well. So there's a lot of experimentation going on here. Most of them declare that they have fixed update intervals. The median we found was 1 month, but there's a big difference from 1 day to every 2 years. But in many, it's also unclear, and that's why we think we need to create some reporting guidelines to help people do it in a responsible way. Only 14% of all of them reported when they will be retired, and only about 40% actually gave any indication as to whether they're actually living. So you wouldn't actually know whether they're living or not by looking at the interface. So looking at it more systematically, looking at some of the criteria from the PRISMA Living Systematic Review checklist, you'll see here the adherence to some of those checklist items. Many of them are, you can see here, like, okay, maybe 40% of them show that they're actually living or not, but actually, even less of them, if they're retired, they provide reasons. Only, I think, 14% of them, and also almost none of them provide plans for the forthcoming version. And also, especially for those that are combined with other products, we have no idea as to whether, like, if they say something is updated, we don't know what is updated. Is it the interface being updated? Is it the narrative report being updated? So there's a lot of things to work on here, and there's a lot of new things to explore with regards to methodological surveys. And I think here, Fiona really wanted to make the point that we really need to invest in this to make sure that we can fight misinformation online, so that responsible, high quality, relevant research is usable by people who need it, because otherwise we will never win the fight for an evidence-informed society. And finally, some implications from our paper. Keep assessing adherence to the existing guidelines, such as the Living Systematic Review Guideline or the upcoming Living Evidence Synthesis Guideline, and the Race Automation Guideline. But we also think that there is a need to look more into how automation is actually being implemented, its effects on the review workflow, and build consensus on product-specific guidance. So we are not entirely sure if people should be applying Living Systematic Review guidance to maps. That's why we think there should be map-specific guidance, especially for digital interface elements, versioning, and these sort of elements. And finally, these are the sort of two existing guidelines you can already use. Fumane and other, I already shared it with you and your colleagues. There are quite a few things you have already started implemented in your protocol, which is amazing. Similarly, the RAISE guidelines. But still, I think there's a long way to go for us to actually have a good idea what should be included in those interfaces. I don't know how many minutes I have left, but just if I have a few minutes on the limitations, we only looked at maps in one snapshot in time. There's still no agreed definition of an evidence gap map, which made it quite difficult to decide what's included, what's not. And there were some issues with scope constraints. We were not able to, because there are some complications here. But we think we probably want to look at the full paper to look more. Going forward, we've been talking to Christian and others about a longitudinal study to look actually what people are doing, how they're updating it, not just because we only look at what people are planning to do. We didn't look what they actually did. So that's the next step: co-production engagement, reporting guidance, I already mentioned, and what works to drive access and use, an upcoming report funded by the OECD Education and Skills team. So have a look at our paper. Thank you for listening. Hopefully it was quick enough and good enough.
No, thank you, Thomas, for this excellent presentation. You did great. I know you have been put on the spot, so thank you so much for the presentation. And it's really interesting to see the gaps in those 44 digital interfaces. The issue around transparency, the lack of guidelines. It's a recurrent theme in your presentation. And so I like the point where you mentioned about the living component, because at Alive, we are trying to demystify what living evidence is all about. So based on everything you saw from that review, do we know what are the distinguishing features that can help us separate, let's say, an interface that's simply online from an interface that is genuinely living? Because at Alive, we try to push for genuine living evidence. So what would you say are these defining features that separates having something online, something maybe periodically updated, versus a truly living digital interface? What are the two maybe defining features of that?
Yes, so I actually discussed this with Fiona yesterday, and we had actually two thoughts on this, and I'm just sharing a link to the paper somebody asked. So I think first of all, if something is online, it doesn't mean it's living, right? I think that's clear, and it's kind of a digital interface is by nature evolving. It's not a kind of a static document like a report, but it's basically a software that is kind of being updated. So I think we need to look more into the nitty-gritties, but let me just also add a few things on more on the definition side here, is that a lot of people define these living products differently. So I know that the Living Atlas team, that's what we've been discussing with Fiona. I think you're operationalizing it by using the word living. So I think if I remember correctly, let me know if I misunderstood it, but I think you're including only products that classify themselves as living. Now, we had a more inclusive approach. So even if they used other words, like continuously updated, or we could see that they're planning to update it regularly, we would still include it. But then you've got these gray zones. Let's say if authors say, oh, we're going to be updating it regularly, provided if funding allows, or until this amount, because that's where we have funding secured. Now that, but I think that's where we need as a field to really come up with some definitions exactly to make sure we are on the same page.
Thank you, Thomas. And so I will now move to the panel discussion. But before we do that, I would just like to hear from the audience. So we have a poll. If you can please fill the poll while I start introducing the panel. So the question for the audience is, what do you see as the biggest barrier to using living evidence repositories? And we will revisit the answers during the panel discussion. And so while the audience is answering the question, I would like to switch to the panel discussion, which, as we mentioned earlier, will be divided into 3 themes: around access, around cost efficiency, and around AI and sustainability. So I will move to the first round, which is on access. And I want to start from where you ended, Fumane. So you said that availability is not the same as accessibility. So from your different perspectives, what are the biggest barriers preventing living evidence repositories from becoming part of routine decision-making? So I work at the interface between evidence and policy, and these repositories are still the black swan. So what can we do? What's the biggest barrier preventing them from being used by evidence users and as well as evidence producers? Fumane, I will start with you. So maybe you can start from your experience with the HPV repository.
Thank you so much, Rasha. That's a very important question. In our case, I think the main challenge is workflow feed. We work with national immunization decision makers, and they're working against immediate operational timelines sometimes, not even sometimes, most times, almost all the time. So their questions may concern routinization or maybe financing or reaching Miss Girls or upcoming campaign. And they may not have the time to search a repository or to interpret the evidence that is there, or interact with the evidence map and compare multiple studies themselves. And I think there's also a difference between global and national evidence needs. A global partner may be looking for example, across countries for general, lessons that can be generalized, while a national program may need to know what is feasible within its financing, and workforce. So I think what this means is that the implication is that making a repository available is not sufficient. We need intermediary functions that can bring the evidence closer to the decision. We have started with summaries, but I think these summaries need to be targeted. We need to be able to facilitate interpretation and maybe even country-specific evidence products and links to routine program processes. So routine use is still developing, and I think we have demonstrated use in structured learning, but it's a work in progress, and there's hope. So I think in a nutshell, availability creates the opportunity for use, but institutional integration is what makes use routine. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Fumani. Thomas, does that resonate with what you found across the broader landscape?
And I just wanted to say that we are not yet absolutely sure, because we are actually conducting a review on this, and we'll be presenting some findings soon. So it's a little bit early for me to say definitely, but I'll definitely see that we found studies exactly. Institutionalization is a really important aspect of that, and in many cases it is required for the use to happen. Other than that, also it's the capacity to use evidence. You sometimes it's just not enough to have an amazing, slick product that people will be able to find. Even maybe they will get some super tailored messages at the right time, but if they are not able to understand exactly what it is and how it can help them, and that's a problem. So there's a lot of, I think, need for these capacity building components, either as a typical training, but also maybe as a sort of maybe these digital interesting components that are emerging. So that's one thing on that. But I think Fiona also on this, she wanted to mention that there's been quite a bit of progress on that, and it's it's not just about finding evidence, but it's also about being able to trust it, interpret it, and apply it. So it's not just about improving discoverability, but also interoperability, transparency. So basically things like that, what ESIC is doing, thinking about this from a very high infrastructure level to ensure there's no duplication of effort, and to use economies of scale, which we all need to do things quicker, cheaper, and better for the small budgets that we get.
No, so and from the review that you have done, so were you able to identify one or two design features that will enhance accessibility of digital interfaces? Because we know that when we're talking about living evidence repositories, they also need that digital interface. So is there maybe one or two design features that could help enhance access and usability?
I would say with the caveat, it's still a bit early for me to say definitely, but what we've definitely seen some mentions of intuitive navigation, strong, well-calibrated search functionality, transparent metadata, and updating details, and clear visual presentation of evidence, possibly through these emerging conversational interfaces, which seem to be reducing barriers for some, but increasing to others. And hopefully that's all I can say about that.
I want to move now to cost and efficiency, because one of the major promises of these living evidence repositories is that they reduce duplication and make the whole evidence production process more efficient. So, Fumani, from your experience, have you seen efficiency gain? Like, where have you seen those gains, and what stages of the evidence production process became less resource intensive? And what new investment have been maybe required to keep the repository living? Because I know that it's not only about having that repository, but also ensuring it's continuously updated. So can you maybe reflect on the issue of efficiency? Are you seeing some signs? So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Resha. I think it's still early days, but the greatest efficiency or gains that we have seen have been in our ability to identify, screen, and classify and reuse. So as we have seen from version 3, and if you download the report and you look at it, you see that we were able to build on the methods and the screening prompt and infrastructure that were developed through earlier versions of the repository that are instead of starting from scratch. So AI assisted title and abstract screening and helped us process a very large search yield. The version 3 search identified around 76,318 new records, and of those, 1,220 were added to the version 3, which led to the 1,961 that we see. So human and full text screening with second reviewer check, we're still there. But the efficiency, I think, comes from the fact that we can reuse evidence work rather than repeatedly starting from zero. We are currently working on a sustainability plan. Hopefully in the coming months, we'll be able to say more to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Fumane. And my final round is on AI, because AI is really transforming evidence synthesis at remarkable speed, and the Living Evidence Repository is no exception. So I'm going to start with you, Thomas. So based on what you've seen from the landscape, so which functions of living evidence interfaces can responsibly, so I want to emphasize on responsibly, be supported by AI? And more importantly, what are the minimum information that repositories and their digital interfaces need to report about AI use, etc., to build the user's trust?
Right. So let me just say that my knowledge of this is a little bit outdated. Last time I looked at it was probably 5-6 months ago. But when I did, it was these were mostly processes revolving around support and screening coding that have been demonstrated quite promising results. Less so for risk of bias, but I think there has been some development since then on the risk of bias. Like there's a great rater. I think, and there's some other tools that are showing also some interesting developments. And I think there's, from what I understand, but just don't quote me on this, I think stages such as search, analysis, visualizations are still in very early stages, especially when you look at these generative AI supported interfaces like chatbots. I think this is where still there's a lot of work to be done.
And Fumera, you've already shown us in your presentation that AI is actually supporting the HPV repository. So can we maybe have more of a deep dive? So where exactly has AI delivered the greatest value, and where has it fallen short of expectation? And when we talk about AI, are we talking about large language models, etc.? So can we do a bit of a deep dive into that before I open the floor for audience question and answer?
Okay, just like Thomas, I'm not the expert in this, but I'll try my best. As with the previous question, the answer is the same. AI has delivered the greatest value in high volume, repetitive and structured tasks. So version 3, it supported title and screening across the large yield that we have already talked about. We are using ChatGPT 4.1 as the LLM, and this supported title and abstract screening. Screening prompt achieved recall of 0.9 against the test set. There's a lot of that, but it's all in the report. And if anyone is interested in it further, they can go to it. But I think where the AI has fallen short is with regard to context, judgment, and accountability. We need those. AI cannot determine when a question is most important to a ministry official, or whether evidence is from one setting or another, or whether it is transferable. So we need a human in the loop to decide on this. Oversight remains essentials. So yeah, it's slowly evolving. We'll see where it goes, but these are still, to be honest, very early days, and we are using AI very cautiously as the partnership. Thank you.
No, thank you. And I think this is an important message that yes, automation can help repositories scale up, and they are actually doing that, but transparency, rigorous methods, and human oversight are what make the living evidence trustworthy. Because if we produce at better speed, but we're giving evidence that's not trustworthy, it defeats the whole purpose, and the living evidence repository can never reach its full potential. So I will now open the floor for question and answer from our audience. So please post your questions, any clarifications you might have to our speakers in the question and answer box, and we will try to respond to as much as we can. And I know we launched the poll, the previous one, but I'm not sure we were able to see the answer. Christian, were we able to see the answer to the poll around the barriers?
Oh yeah, I saw it there, but I thought like you were gonna mention to that, but I'll let me see. Oh yeah, can you see it on your screen?
No, it didn't
No?
appear on our screen.
Okay, I'll put end poll.
So yeah, maybe we
Oh
can
yeah,
bring, we can.
now it should be.
Oh, interesting. So the limited awareness that they exist. And this is quite interesting, and it's not surprising for me because I also work, as I mentioned, at the interface between evidence and evidence production and use. And most of the time we talk about systematic reviews, scoping reviews, gap maps, and rarely people mention evidence repositories. So I think really we need to start by making people aware about the value of living evidence repositories and what they can bring and contribute to the evidence ecosystem. Fumani, were you surprised by the answers? Did you expect the limited awareness to be the highest one? So there's also the cost and sustainability, which is an important issue that both of you have reflected upon. It's interesting that trust was the lowest, trust in their completeness or currency.
Yes, not surprised. I think one of the things that we realized early on was that we still have to socialize people around living. It's something that needs to be constantly communicated until it becomes a norm for people. So living and then adding repository, it's not, especially in my sector, in global health, where I come from. It might be different in the evidence side, but for global health and the implementation side, it's still a bit of an not well known or not well understood. Thank
We
you.
have one question from Anna. So maybe clarifying the definition of living. So what constitutes, when we talk living evidence, so I think it's a good question. So what constitutes a living evidence repository from maybe a basic repository? So she would like more clarity on the definition of living.
Yeah, so I think that this is I think everybody is struggling with that, but it's not just about living, but it's also about what is a repository to me, because are we talking about an evidence, a map, or are we talking about a database, with bibliographic records? I think that there's still so many things for us to agree on. That yes, and I previously alluded, I think so. Some people would say anything that calls itself living is living. Other people would say it needs to have this continually updated process where you have people who have explicitly mentioned that they're going to be updating it either based on a specific interval, monthly, yearly, whatever, or based on a trigger. For example, when new studies emerge. So this is kind of taken from the PRISMA Living Systematic Review definition. There are other definitions as well, which approach it slightly differently.
Yeah. And Fumaina, would you like to add to that before we close and wrap up?
Yeah, I think I mentioned that in our in the presentation. It's for us, for the partnership, the fact that living refers to the ongoing evidence surveillance that we do with our synthesis teams continually, and also the user and partner feedback that informs how the taxonomy and the interface evolve. So we'll continue to do that for as long as it's needed. But all of us are still coming to terms and defining, I think, what living really means. And I was really happy to see the resources that Thomas shared. I think we'll look at them and continue to refine and to make the repository a trusted source of evidence for HPV vaccine delivery, and hopefully other antigens as it evolves. Thank you.
Thank you both. And before we close, I want to draw your attention to our next Alive Learning Forum session, which is on good enough to trust, so standards for living evidence and the ethical use of AI. And I also want to encourage everyone to explore our Living Evidence Atlas. You can find it on our website. And if you can show the slide, please. And so finally, I want to thank our speakers for sharing your expertise and experience, and thanks to everyone who joined us today. I think the discussion reminded us that living evidence repositories are indeed much more than searchable databases or storage functions. So they are indeed part of a broader ecosystem, and they have the potential to transform how evidence is produced, shared, and used. And there is some progress. We are seeing progress in terms of improving access, reducing duplication, but important challenges remain around usability, sustainability, and long-term investment. So ultimately, I think the question is not whether living evidence repositories work, but under what conditions they become trusted, accessible, and sustainable public goods for evidence-informed decision-making. So on behalf of the Alive Learning Forum, we would like to thank all of you, and we hope to see you in future upcoming sessions. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.